presentation on artificial intelligence, media, and democracy. I'm Sneha Ravanor, and I'm the founder and president at ENCODE Justice, and our website is right there, encodejustice.org. So let's get started. So, like I said, hi, I'm Sneha. I'm a high school junior from San Jose, California, and a progressive organizer with a vision for structural change and an interest in how technology will shape the future of our civil rights and democracy. In July 2020, I founded ENCODE Justice, which is a youth-powered global organization building a movement for justice and equity under artificial intelligence. Our team now spans over 20 US states and 10 countries. I also work on congressional campaigns, most recently Cori Bush's US House campaign and Georgia runoffs. I write about politics and I oversee criminal justice advocacy at the High School Democrats of America. So I'm going to get straight into it, and I hope that it's very easy to understand and accessible. So what is artificial intelligence? Artificial intelligence, or AI, refers to a set of technologies used to mimic human judgment. It uses previous examples to find patterns that can be applied to make predictions about the future. So an algorithm, which is a term you might have heard being used in the context of technology or AI before, is a procedure or set of steps executed by a machine to achieve a certain goal. So what are some examples of AI-based algorithms that we encounter in our daily lives? We have the Netflix recommendation engine, which looks at, past movies we've enjoyed and recommends more movies like that. We have the TikTok algorithm, which, looks at what types of TikToks you interact with the most, how long you spend interacting with them, and then recommends more TikToks like that. Personally, I'm an avid TikTok user, and I've been freaked out by how personalized the algorithm gets and how tuned it really is to your interests and what you like. And also there's the Instagram sorting algorithm, which takes, what users we interact with the most, what types of content we interact with the most, and uses that to organize posts in our feed based on how likely we are to be interested in them. Whether or not we recognize it, these algorithms are governing our lives, and they control which media we consume and what information we're exposed to, which obviously can significantly shape our lives. And that's why it's really important to understand how they work and what their other manifestations are. So how does AI specifically work? I'll give an example here, and I hope it's easy to understand. So let's say I want to use AI to develop an algorithm that can look at a few factors and estimate the value of a house. So some of those factors that are strongly correlated with the house price could be the number of square feet, the number of bathrooms, the grade schools rating for the nearby schools, things like that. And then, the algorithm looks at a training data set of thousands of example houses. It has information for each of them, and it has the house price. And it uses complex math to approximate how much each of those factors influences the final house price, and essentially puts together a formula. And then the algorithm applies the formula to a testing data set of other houses where we have all that information, and it tests its predictive ability. The algorithm continuously refines the formula until it weights each of the factors appropriately. And then at that point, I can maybe give another house where I don't know the price, and I can trust it, based on this information, based on the square feet, based on the number of bathrooms, I can trust it to give a pretty accurate estimate as to what the house price is. And guess what? That is a lot like the Zillow algorithm that it uses for its estimate feature. Except that considers way more factors and also looks at images of the house. So here's like an example of what this estimate feature could look like for this made up house. So what are deepfakes? This gets to the media and democracy aspect of the presentation. And this talks about a pretty insidious manifestation of AI that we have to be aware of and how it could be spreading fake news and misinformation. So as you can see, here's a GIF. Here, the face of Amy Adams on the left is modified to look like actor Nicolas Cage's on the right, and it's extremely realistic. His face is overlaid on hers, while everything else, including what she's saying, remains the same. So, can you think of ways in which this sort of technology could be misused? Because, for me, tons of possible use cases come to mind. So yeah, how could those deepfakes be used maliciously? So they could easily spread misinformation of the face of an actor swapped with the face of an important political figure to make it look like they're saying something they didn't actually say. This has already happened, actually. How could that impact elections, for example? Once deepfakes become easier to make, people could generate fake videos of candidates making outrageous, provocative statements and spread them widely. They're so sophisticated, they're extremely hard to detect, and some look very realistic to the human eye. And apps have already been developed that could create a fake but realistic nude image of someone. All you have to do is upload their face. And they've now been taken off the app stores because of their terrible impacts, but many popular actresses have already been targeted, including Gal Gadot, Emma Watson, and Natalie Portman. And here, the face of SNL actress Kate McKinnon on the left is modified to look like US Senator and 2020 Democratic candidate Elizabeth Warren on the right. Their faces are swapped using deepfake technology, which is a form of AI. We're lucky that these weren't a huge threat in the 2020 presidential election, but if they were, how could that have impacted the outcome? Could supporters of one candidate have used this technique to make lies and spread lies about the other? How can we fight deepfakes? Here's a good part. More AI has already been developed to detect deepfakes that are otherwise hard to spot by humans. By making sure social media platforms are supplied with these highly effective deepfake detection algorithms, we can take them down and limit their spread on the internet. Members of Congress have already also introduced multiple helpful pieces of legislation. For example, Senator Ben Sasse proposed a bill that would make creating and distributing a deepfake illegal. Representative Yvette Clarke proposed a bill that would require deepfake creators to include a watermark or some other indication that it's not real, so that it doesn't spread misinformation when it's released. And think about it yourself. What measures would you put in place if you could? Remember that First Amendment protections are still incredibly important, and so it's unlikely that deepfakes could be outright banned because that would be an extension of censorship. So what are readfakes? AI has already learned to generate text independently by studying humans' writing. So we could try a demo usually, but it's a recorded live stream right now, so we can't do that. And what I did was I entered the pretty wild prompt, flying cars are dropping pizza slices from the sky. So obviously that's an extremely crazy prompt with like many weird parts put together. And I plugged it into this and I want to see how it completes the article. And it gives me this entire article about Pizza Hut partnering with Arizona startup Xerx to create this is all written by a computer in the style of a human. This is all written by a computer in the style of real journalism. This is not, plagiarized from somewhere because obviously there's no article about flying cars dropping pizza slices. This is completely generated authentically and independently by a computer. Obviously, this seems cool, but it could be used to spread undetectable fake news. So how can AI help detect fake news and partisan bias? Just like with deepfakes with fake news, AI can be both a problem and a solution. Researchers have been able to train extremely accurate models with over 95% accuracy to identify misleading news stories. Some are able to rapidly cross-check an article with other articles on the same topic to evaluate factual consistency. Others can compare the headline to the content to flag for clickbait. Of course, it's hard to reach 100% accuracy since falsehoods can be more subtle, but there have been lots of strides and developments here. For example, a team from the University of Maryland was able to train AI to accurately identify a given member of Congress's political ideology based on their statements during congressional debates. How can AI help detect fake news and partisan bias? Continuing on what we said before. So MIT's Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory developed a tool that could root out and catch fake news outlets by identifying certain words that are typically correlated with bias, like hoax and false flag. And we have a graphic of that here. These words, crisis actor, hoax, false flag, demonic, these are very commonly associated with fake news outlets. And so sort of by looking at a range of these articles for each outlet, the MIT tool was able to quickly catch if a outlet was engineering fake news and disseminating that widely. So something next. How can AI help detect partisan gerrymandering? So gerrymandering is a tactic used by both major political parties to redraw the boundaries of their districts in their favor. So if you see this graphic right here, you see that, the raw percentage, the popular vote, 60% blue, 40% red, but there are different ways that you can draw these districts to divide them up in ways that could be beneficial to both parties. So in this situation where you have, the red overpowered in each district, blue wins, and red doesn't pick up a single district. Here, if you draw these like funky looking lines, you could actually find a way for red to win, even though overall with the popular vote, there are more blue voters than red voters. And obviously with that, that raises a very serious concern when it comes to democracy, because, if it's majority parties who have the power to redraw these lines, they can very easily do that to their political advantage. And that can generate a lot of voter suppression. So AI is being used to help draw efficient, nonpartisan, mathematically optimized lines, which can help us protect our democracy and ensure that majority parties don't resort to unfair means of suppressing their opponents' votes. So this is another really important extension of AI and one of the most beneficial use cases, in my opinion, of AI. How can AI help us improve election predictions? I'm pretty sure we all saw this last November. One problem we see time and time again is election predictions suck. A team of researchers were able to get pretty close to the final electoral vote count for the 2020 presidential election by using AI to analyze tweets and predict voting behavior. Another team at an Italian AI firm projected all the way back in October that Joe Biden would win 50.2% of the popular vote and Donald Trump would win 47.3% using the social media analysis method. And what was the final popular vote in actuality? 50.7% for Biden to 47.7% for Trump. So you can see it's actually pretty close, and that's pretty impressive for an algorithm. There are obviously some problems here because people to the more extreme ends of the political spectrum, left or right, are more likely to tweet or be public about their opinions than moderate voters. So it's not completely accurate, not always a perfect picture, but it still fares far better than traditional forecasts and could be a new tool in our toolbox if we want to really optimize our predictive ability, because obviously that's been an issue that's been challenging for us for the past few election cycles. So that's pretty much it for the presentation. Here's how you can get involved with ENCODE Justice. You can follow us at Instagram or at TikTok at ENCODE Justice. You can read our Medium publication at medium.com/encode-justice. You can apply for our fellowship program to join our teams, tinyurl.com/EJ Fellowship. You can create a regional chapter for your state or country, and you can sign up to contribute an article to our Medium publication because we always are welcoming external writers.
Okay, we have a few questions, some of them that were asked beforehand and some of them that are new through the presentation. So what are other ways beyond deep what are other threats of deep fakes beyond politics?
Like I mentioned, they've been used quite widely for revenge porn, sort of to create sexually explicit images of someone using their face. They can sort of swap the faces out, and that is a huge threat because they're very easy to generate. There were apps that were making them easy to generate within like a few clicks, within a few seconds, and obviously there's a huge risk there, and that could be, a violation of anyone's privacy. So there's that. And for the most part, female celebrities have been prime victims of that sort of use of deepfakes. And we've also found that we've actually found deepfake videos of terrorist groups sort of egging on people to do certain activities, and that could be really threatening because that could sort of indict people into those terrorist groups, and that is a huge new counterterrorism issue that the FBI and CIA are dealing with, especially with foreign terrorist groups, and that is a huge threat we're dealing with right now. So those are the two threats that come to mind, but for the most part, definitely, I think elections are going to be the huge source of fear when it comes to AI and deepfakes in the future, because that could completely distort an election, that could completely spread, propaganda, misinformation, and very quickly, very easy to generate, and it looks really realistic, so it's hard to detect.
So how can we better control AI's application to news and media?
So like I mentioned, we can definitely use sort of legislative tools. So for example, there's been multiple pieces of legislation proposed to regulate deepfakes, which I think is really important. And we also need to regulate readfakes. I think it's a bit harder with readfakes because it just looks like text. There's not really any indication that's written by a computer, not by a human, but we have to there has to be some sort of penalty imposed for, spreading that misinformation on a wide scale, because it can have a huge impact. It can, really be persuasive for some people. And if it's during the time of election or some other huge democratic event, that would be a huge problem, of course. So that is one thing that we have to do. We also have to personally be more aware of these sorts of things and be aware of how to detect them in our daily lives. So personally, I've looked at so many deep fakes that it's a bit easier for me to detect what's a deep fake and what's real, but people have to be exposed to more and more deep fakes, people to identify and flag that sort of misinformation, that sort of fake news, that sort of fake videos and photos. That's really important as well. And like I said, we have to keep developing AI that can actually be used to fight fake news and partisan bias and misinformation by being able to detect things that we can't. And once we have social media platforms equipped with those sorts of algorithms, they can sort of rapidly take those sorts of posts down and prevent them from spreading.
So some members of Congress or former politicians have called for independent companies to redraw districts in states. Is it better to have independent companies do it, or for it to be done through AI?
So I think it's actually optimal for it to be done through AI, because I think that with any human involvement, there's bound to be some level of partisan bias. Obviously, I think that having those independent commissions is a step up from the sort of majority party system that we have right now that has led to pretty egregious gerrymandering in many states. But I think that, at the end of the day, AI, its use in gerrymandering hasn't really been found to show any bias. It's pretty efficient. It reduces partisanship completely by finding the most mathematically optimized lines, not the most politically optimized lines. And so I think that sort of introducing AI there is a huge step towards um, really removing any human bias or subjectivity concerns that are currently plaguing our democratic system. And so I think that it's a step up from the independent commission, but I think that, obviously that even is better than having the majority party who's in power be able to draw those lines, which obviously can create a lot of problems.
So even though Justice is an independent organization that doesn't necessarily affiliate with a certain party, due to the events of this week, are you all calling for removal of any elected officials, whether that be the president or any of the congressmen and women who voted to overturn the results?
Yeah, so ANCO Justice is completely nonpartisan, but like I said, we did issue an official statement earlier this week condemning the acts of white supremacy and bigotry we saw at the Capitol. We thought that was terrible. We thought that, obviously I'm giving this presentation on media and democracy. I value democracy. I value, free and fair elections. I think that's really integral to our system. And I think that, any threat to that, any armed insurrection should be vehemently condemned. As an organization, we don't take a stance on the removal of certain elected officials or candidates because that's out of the scope of our work. We're not, politically inclined. We focus more on these issues without taking specific stances on individual candidates. But as a person, do I call for the removal of those elected officials? Yes, I do. And I do think that there has to be some sort of retribution for those actions. And I think that we have to set precedent that those sorts of things will not go out without punishment.
For our last question, what can our audience do to support that fight, whether that be through grassroots or organizing or whatever it may be?
Yeah, so like I mentioned during the presentation, you can definitely apply for our fellowship program. You can, read our Medium publications, sort of support us there. You can also sign up to contribute articles yourself. So that by joining those teams and by joining our fellowship program, you can help us write curriculum like this. You can help us write policy proposals. You can help us, sort of advocate to legislators and host events and webinars and meetings like that. And that's, one way you can get involved. And you can also help us by starting a regional chapter for your state or country that would focus on these sorts of issues. And so I think those are the main ways in which youth listening right now can get involved and be a part of our organization.
Well, thank you for joining us today. We really enjoyed having you give us a presentation on artificial intelligence.
Of course. So thank you so much. And thank you so much for this opportunity. Yeah.